Welcome here to the Ploughing site in Rathanishka in County Laois, where I'm joined on our live Agriland pavilion stage by the presidents of the farm organisations IFA, ICSA and ICMSA. So I'm joined by ICSA President Dermot Kelleher, ICMSA President Pat McCormack and of course IFA President Tim Cullinan. Thank you for joining us on the stage today, gentlemen. First of all, I might go, I suppose, to yourself, Tim, and ask you about the cap that's very, very close to coming to our door in 2023, and a lot of farmers out and about today, this is the first opportunity. A lot of people have got together to join in a good number of years at a big event like this, and still a lot of people unhappy with the various schemes coming out of the cap. I mean, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I suppose, well, first of all, so I'd like to say, it's great to be back here, and it's great for the National Ploughing Association with such a massive event here and the amount of people that's around here today. And like you're right, there's always a lot of issues in agriculture, and going back to the CAP, recently the Commission has agreed our CAP strategic plan. Now, we didn't see the final details of that yet, but I'm led to believe that it is similar to the proposals that went back out. I suppose, look, this was a very challenging CAP, and absolutely you're right, a lot of farmers were very concerned, in particular with the moving of funding or money from the productive sector to the less productive sector. And what I mean by that obviously is we're dealing with convergence now, going from 66% to 85% for the first time ever. We have CRIS or front loading, and we have eco schemes. And all of those measures is moving money from primarily what CAP was all about in the past was compensating farmers, European farmers, for producing food at a price that consumer was able to buy, and obviously now that is changing to more environmental measures. So look, there is concerns around that. As I say, it's the shift in the funding, but I think the Minister has a key role to play here now as well, because we're coming up to the national budget next week, and obviously the co-funding side of the CAP is going to be very, very important. And we have all of the schemes, the Suckler cow scheme, the O, or the sheep welfare scheme, and the tillage scheme as well. It's important, it's critically important now that the proper funding is put in place. We were shortchanged in the negotiations with the Suckler cow, so the Minister needs to be coming forward with a budget of 40 million in the upcoming budget. That's going to be critically important. And just finally, obviously we have a new environmental scheme, and it's absolutely incredible. I say it's absolutely incredible. A scheme to the value of 1.5 billion, and the way that has been rolled out. Massive concern among farmers about how this scheme is going to be developed and rolled out on farms. And we actually had a meeting with the Minister on this last week, and our team is at the moment working with the Minister's officials in trying to get amendments to that scheme, because it's a costly scheme, because farmers have to take on quite a number of measures, and all of those measures have to be completed in the first year. It's a 5-year scheme, and that's a massive challenge. So you could say there's going to be a lot of leakage here from the work the farmer has to do to be able to draw down the funding, but also he's going to have to employ a consultant or an advisor, and that's going to be very costly for the participant in that scheme.
I will come back to the other schemes in just a moment, but I might go to you, Dermot, in particular the Suckler element, I suppose, of the scheme. Now, I know that there has a potential Suckler exit scheme being mooted by certain officials, or a proposal in the department. Clearly the farm organisations have come out and said it's not something that they were pushing for in any way, but this was still something considered by our Department of Agriculture, an exit scheme for sucklers in this country.
It was just came out in maybe media, but there was no discussion, there was no agreement made on anything like that. And there's a big parts of rural Ireland they're not fit for maybe dairying, and the big parts of rural Ireland depending on sucklers, sheep and the dairy stock sector. And our concern is beef at 470, 480, sheep around 6 euros. It's going to cost 6 euros to feed beef for the winter, without nothing for your investment, nothing for yourself and nothing for your farm. And we're very concerned that dry stock farmers can't be asked to produce top-class nutritious food for nothing. And this is what's happening all the time. And without Suckler farmers and without the dry stock sector, I mean, without food, you have no food, you have no future, you have no farming. So I think the whole thing is skewed, but we believe that the Suckler industry is very, very important. Same as the sheep and the beef sector. And I think agriculture in general can't be used as a whipping boy any longer for climate change and for every other agenda. I think it's very important to realise how important food security is and how important it is to keep the lights on in rural Ireland.
And Pat McCormack, the Suckler, one particular sector there that would put itself forward as probably one of the most sustainable or environmentally friendly, given the nature of Suckler breeding and grazing. And what about the dairy sector? There's big targets here to meet for agriculture, 25% emissions reduction by 2030. Many feel that's not even close to achievable. What about the dairy sector? Are they going to be able to contribute to that in a significant way?
I think all people, all sectors of society, all agriculture will be a contributing factor. But I suppose before we move away from the beef, because very often the myth can be lost, 57% of the national kill originates in the dairy herd. And Tim alluded to the CAP reform. It's absolutely critical under CAP reform that we have a meaningful dairy calf to beef scheme as we move forward. I see it, because I take it very serious, the targets that are being suggested out there. I see it, the only national president to sit on both the Dairy Vision Group and the Beef and Sheep National Vision Group. There is a target out there. I think it's overly ambitious, 25%. I believe 22% would have been a challenge. But agriculture has never been short as regards playing its part. I've seen a huge incorporation of clover on farms this year. We see the signpost farms delivering reduced chemical fertiliser usage, and we see on-farm protected urea being used, which can deliver substantially in comparison to can, but also low emission slurry spreading. So there is a significant amount of science being invested in at the moment as well, and whether that is reduced emissions from a slurry storage and a slurry spreading perspective, but also from a genetic perspective. ICBF have a huge amount of work done there, and I think during the quota era, and you mentioned the dairy industry, during the quota era, dairy farmers were breeding for protein, they're breeding for fertility, they'll be breeding for environmental emissions into the future. I have no doubt but to believe that. And I think in the cold light of day, when we analyse what's been sequestered on farms, we're in a far better place than people lead us to believe. But unfortunately, there's an agenda out there amongst some of our national media that needs to be curbed.
Well, I suppose people will say there's an agenda the whole time that farming is being vilified, Tim, that, no more than what Dermot said, it's being used as the whipping boy for the climate struggle and the climate change elements that we have to bring into the CAP, and the way that farming practices and methods have to change over the next 7 years, 20 years, 25 and 30 years. But at the end of the day, if there's a change to anything, no more than if you're in the public service and you're trying to renegotiate terms and conditions of how people work, that has to come at a cost. And in a year that farmers are already facing increased inputs from feed, fuel and fertiliser, how are they going to afford? Granted, technologies may be coming on board, but a lot of the time this involves investment of some sort by the farmer.
Absolutely. Look, I think the important thing now is the ceiling is set. So we had the debate earlier on in the year. We had a range from 22 to 30%. We know now we have to deal with 25%. Absolutely, it's a massive challenge. You're right, and it's important to remember now that farmers are on this journey already, and farmers have adopted a lot of measures already. Following the Chagos-Mack curve with the low emission slurry spreading, the protected urea and multi-species grasses and particular clover and fixing clover. I think that's all very, very important to farmers. It's important that message is out there as well. It's not that farmers have been sitting back for the last few years. Farmers have been engaging in this, and they want to protect their industry into the future. But you're right, there's going to be massive cost here as well. And it was amazing at the time of the more recent debate on settling the ceilings. Minister Ryan was advocating that farmers would adopt further measures, as in solar, rooftop solar and anaerobic digestion, and that's all fine and great, but you're right, there's an absolute cost involved in this. So when farmers want to be part of developing new industry on their farms and generate a new income from that as well, but there's a massive cost in doing this, and we need a specific budget for both the solar, rooftop solar and anaerobic coming from Minister Ryan's department, the Department of Environment, because we have a TAM scheme and only funding available for rooftop solar at the moment is coming from the TAM funding. And that funding was always put in place originally, for development on farm, in particular slurry storage, low emission slurry spreading, all that kind of equipment. And it's important that the two are separated out. So look, there's a huge challenge here. Farmers are adopting and will adopt further, but we need funding here as well. And absolutely, the science is evolving as well. And what's very, very important, as that science evolves, and after numbers of trials that it is peer reviewed. But what's critically important then is that the EPA is going to acknowledge this, and the farmers will get credits for all of the new advances in science as well.
Well, currently, for example, a lot of solar renewable energy and the investments that farmers will make into agriculture, say they have carbon sequestration or they have carbon credits, that won't be considered within the agricultural emissions reduction target, which seems very unfair. So you can't blame a farmer to say, okay, everyone wants to do their bit for the climate and for the world and for the planet, but at the end of the day, if it's costing the farmer and he's not getting anything out of it, how can you incentivise him? We're hearing from people that people are not going to sign up to acres because they're not going to get anything out of it this year. The way that it's, I suppose, outlined this year means it might have a big bulk of money, but it's less into the farmer's pocket. So I don't know if the uptake for the likes of acres will even be what it was intended to be originally. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, you see, the difficulty there is, I suppose, the environmental scheme, and obviously when this government was formulated, they gave a commitment to have a REPS type scheme. And in the 90s, farmers benefited from REPS type schemes, the tradesmen in the rural economy benefited from it. But the acre scheme, it's very hard to quantify any benefit for either the farmer or indeed the local economy. But you articulated it very well there. Tim mentioned the solar energy, and there's huge opportunity out there on farms with the infrastructure that's there to put solar panels on every roof that's out there. But the frustration from an agricultural perspective, and as somebody representing farmers, is that won't be accounted for in the agricultural inventory, and that's usually frustrating. Equally, if every farmer that's here today planted 1,000 trees to go to land usage, and that's frustrating. So we're condemned for what we do, and if we make changes, there's no benefit in it for us. And that inventory has to be altered. We need to get EPA recognition fast for the work that's been done by Tegas as regards research and the science they can deliver into the future. But overall, I'd be optimistic that we're a resilient sector. We've delivered with the abolition of quotas, and we've delivered with the challenges of fodder crises. There was huge cooperations between farm organisations and between the department. But this day week, the government need to step up to the plate, and they need to step up in a meaningful manner on budget day, because they have set us an ambition, they've set us a target, and they have to help us to achieve it, because we can't do it on our own. I mean, you go around here today and there's fantastic new technologies, low emission storage spreaders, but the cost of them is not in realisation with the ability of the farm family to make a purchase of that nature. And they need significant supports to embrace the technologies of today and indeed the technologies of the future. Equally, we need incentives, and we need a reduction in regulations, whether that's the connection to the grid or planning permission for solar panels, so we can fast track this. Because the reality of it is, if we get a dull, dreary day in the month of December, our national grid may not be able to supply for the demand. And there is an opportunity out there, and we are a sector that uses energy to deliver that homegrown energy, shall we say, in an environmentally compatible way. But it needs to be done with incentives on budget day.
In terms of beef, Dermot, one of the ways that they're trying to change, I suppose, the way of rearing beef is to reduce the slaughter age, and hopefully that in turn will contribute to climate action and so on. Your own members in ICSA, I mean, what would incentivise them to try and change what they've done probably for maybe 30 odd years, 40 odd years of a particular way, to get them to move towards this move of an earlier slaughter age?
To move towards earlier slaughter age is the new buzzword, and it's better for the environment, but it's going to cost money. And at the moment, beef farmers are not making a bob. And if they want them to spend more money and finish cattle earlier, it'll have to pay. And in fairness, the processors can't be dropping the price of the beef while costs and inflation are going the other way. It doesn't make any logical sense to be pulling the price of beef while inflation and costs are going the other way. I know they want us to finish cattle earlier. It'll cost money, and there'll have to be a better price for beef, because beef farmers can't be expected to be working for nothing. At €6 a kilo, we reckon at ICSA to feed cattle for the winter, and that's without nothing for your investment and nothing for your hours and your time, and that's not sustainable. Farmers can't keep working for nothing, and if they want to finish cattle earlier, there's no problem, but we need to be paid to do it. We need to get help to do it. There's a lot of money out there to be invested to get our targets in order, and if agriculture is a big emitter, we need a big part of that money to help us.
And in terms of what I might say to the three briefly then is, you're involved in farming every day, you know what it entails. We're here at the Ploughing, which brings in a much wider audience than agriculture. And people think that farmers pour mouth, and that they're looking at commodity prices and they're seeing milk is good, beef, well okay, it's back a bit at the minute, but it wasn't terrible this year, the weather played ball this year, things aren't the worst for farming. How can you explain to the public what it takes when they see their shopping going up the bill at the end of the grocery list every week and their food prices rising, and they hear farmers saying we can't produce for below cost anymore, and they don't understand what it takes to get that product on the table? Tim, what can you tell people in the wider audience?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question if you look at it, and if you look at the CSO figures for the last year, ag inflation is running at 40%. So we're dealing with massive increases in food, or in feed, fuel and fertiliser. And the other figure which is very important is all consumer spending is running at 10%, but food inflation is running at 7%. So we're up here at 40%, food inflation is at 7%. You know what I mean? So we're the first ones that have taken on all of those costs. And this is a very serious situation that we find ourselves in as farmers. So we're the first to be hit by, when we had the Russian invasion in Ukraine last February, we've seen an absolute massive increase in our cost of production. Absolutely, I acknowledge, that the country, where the country is at the moment, there's a huge concern around the cost of living. But overall, in the context, food is still very, very cheap. And we're at a time now where consumer spends approximately 10% of their income on food. If you went back 20, 30 years ago, that was in the region of 30%. So the food that farmers are producing is out there for the consumer at a very competitive price. And this goes back to the whole debate around CAP again. The reason, if you go back to the Treaty of Rome back in the 1950s, the reason the CAP was originally put in place was to compensate farmers that they could produce food that the consumer could afford it. But that has been eroded now. So we have to get more from the marketplace. This is critically important. And I think the consumer understands that as well. But there's another aspect to this as well, is the whole sustainability of rural Ireland. Do you know what I mean? For every euro that a farmer spends, there's €4 going into the local economy. And if we want to sustain people living from Donegal right down to West Cork or right down to Wexford or wherever, we're going to need a vibrant agricultural economy. And I suppose one figure that's worth noting is this country exports 340 or 60 billion of exports each year. 26 billion of that comes from local indigenous industry, and agriculture is 50% of that figure. So that's why it's critically important that this sector is protected, and there's the responsibility on the government to protect this sector into the future as well.
Unfortunately, I'd love to talk to you all day, and we could talk all day, because I'm sure there's plenty of people who have come up to us over the last few days with questions that they'd love to forward on. But look, we'll be here for the 3 days, and indeed I hope that you will come back to us after you kind of gauge the feeling out on the ploughing side, because I'm sure people will be stopping you to answer questions. I suppose this is the first opportunity they might have got to see people in person after we've been off for the COVID pandemic. But thank you very much for joining us on our Agriland live stream today. Tim Cullinan, IFA President, Pat McCormack from the ICMSA, and Dermot Kelleher from the ICSA. Thank you very much for joining us. So that's our first live panel discussion today on the Agriland Pavilion here at the Ploughing in Ratheniska. So we'll head over now to our Agriland team, who are out and about on site getting interviews with those at various stands.
A stand with quite a lot of variety here at the National Ploughing Championships is the Farmhand stand. I'm joined here by Declan Smith, the machinery